Welcome to the Fast Mode podcast series. I'm Tara Neil, and with me today is Dan Hanson, Director of AI Networking and Switch Product Management at Supermicro. Supermicro is a leading vendor of application-optimized total IT solutions, delivering cutting-edge innovation for enterprise, cloud, AI, and 5G telco and edge IT infrastructure. Headquartered in San Jose, California, Supermicro designs and manufactures a comprehensive portfolio of server, AI, storage, IoT, and switch systems, along with software and support services. Dan leads the product management function in the AI network fabrics area, which defines the technical architecture, features, and definitions of AI network segments, supporting all leading industry offers in the AI ML space. He is the author of numerous papers relating to the orchestration, management, networking, compute, and storage aspects of data centers. Dan joins us today as part of our exclusive editorial segment on GenAI for network management. Welcome, Dan. Great to have you on today's episode.
Great. Glad to be here. Hopefully provide some value, and it's always good to have these conversations.
Awesome. Okay, so to kick things off, what, in your opinion, are some of the most promising use cases for generative AI in network management?
Yeah, I think there's a few that we could touch on. I mean, obviously not a comprehensive list, but some of this, if we get back and look at the network itself, it's such a large, I think, organism, for lack of a better term, but it touches so many portions of that infrastructure, and it's very dynamic. If we're not doing an ongoing maintenance operation, set that aside, even the flows that are going through that, there's such a temporal nature to what's happening on the fabric. People are always making modifications, enhancements, adjustments, expansions, applying different security policy, adding users, for example, who have access to the fabric. So it's not really a fire and forget model. So it's very, very dynamic. And in that context, I think the ability to make use of Gen AI really presents a lot of opportunity. And by that, I mean, with all these activities and all the points and elements that are contained within, each of which is creating their own telemetry, their own logging data, their own information, trying to correlate and just gather and store and add context sometimes can be such an incredible challenge in and of itself. And people find themselves acquiring many different types of tools to bring these together, which bring their own challenges, right? And we end up with yet another pane of glass to try to manage these infrastructures.
Exactly.
It just grows, and basically the idea is if there can be a more efficient way to just aggregate, move beyond aggregating the context, but try to interpret that context using AI in a similar way that a staff member might attempt to correlate events, correlate data, relate them to what we call experience, right? Most of us in the industry who deem ourselves experts got that way by making probably fairly, sometimes critical errors on a customer site or on one of our own sites, and learning from that error, hopefully, and learning what not to do. But if we can take those type of learnings and instead of having them reside within the brains of a few expert individuals, reside within an AI infrastructure and be able to train those and update those models, even to the more minor events that happen on the infrastructure, generative AI really presents, first and foremost, maybe one way to instead of trying to work to avoid or move earlier into aggregating all of these data inputs and normalizing these data inputs, instead, very, very powerful tool to take with these large parameter models and the way we model interactions, and start by not making assumptions of relationships that need to be made when we do these aggregations, and let the actual training of the models do their own, come up with their own relationships, and what cause and effects and things like that then come into bear. by doing that, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to approach solutions to problems that just hadn't been considered in the past. So it moves beyond that. And then if there is, as many of us have probably had these issues working within our day jobs, and there's some sort of an unplanned outage, for example, and the mandatory 3 weeks of meetings that usually follows an event such as that.
Yeah.
Um, there's often, tables and many people, at very high levels of the organization who are demanding answers, right? And so there's pressure to try to determine what those root causes may be. And if there's a tool that can natively weave in and out of those contexts and quickly form that relationships that might take humans, many hours or days, and looking at various data sources and trying to harmonize the various inputs. That's an area where I think Gen AI definitely can automate and really speed up that process to help the remediation, and then keep that data such that by projecting future moves, adds, changes,
Yeah.
and just events
Yeah.
onto that infrastructure, you have another staff member who has that enabled intelligence and history and expertise that's built into the system. So that's one of them. Another one is just at the scale of these infrastructure.
Yeah.
There's just the size and number of elements, and trying to have humans and teams of humans coordinate and try to keep things in and do those updating security policy, capacity expansions. If there's a M&A activity and we're trying to bring data centers together, things like this. Often we're all guilty of doing a lot of human error, right? We're trying to copy and paste certain things from one element to another, trying to roll some of
Yeah.
these up, and
Yeah.
invariably we end up making errors. It just is human nature.
Yes.
So if there's a way to put some code, and we try to use tools like Ansible, Puppet, Chef, all Terraform, all these great tool sets to try to automate some of that. But usually we're trying to codify our experience into the tools, trying to do that. If there's a way to have another way for these tools to adapt and learn from these frameworks, and then if we couple it on with like natural language processing, which a lot of people are trying to move into, I can describe my intent maybe in terms that
Yes.
I know, instead of
Yes.
trying to train staff to properly ask the right question of the infrastructure to get the desired outcome. If NLP, I think, will become, especially for more day-to-day mundane operations, I think a way to achieve those outcomes. I think that's another application of Gen AI, to be able to take that and you know a rough example, use Chat GPT to affect an outcome, right, of incrementing capacity at a site or adding users to a site. That would be a good use case. And then lastly is just the lifecycle management. Um, all these things, infrastructure, they have bathtub curves in terms of availability, right? Infant mortality on one end, and then some things even degrade as they're used. I'll use, flash storage as an example, where there's certain numbers of writes per day, and after certain numbers of months and years, elements can degrade. Now, buried within the user interfaces and on these screens, in this wall of screen and a knock, for example, might be some of that data that's there, and we might have to think,
Yep.
to write methods to capture and gather that information. Rather, if I can just feed that sea of data into an AI model that can then be trained and understand those patterns and those relationships, maybe that helps us get in front of pre-failure type situations for that. So that's another example. I mean, you could probably come up with many other examples. Those are a couple just off the top of my head that would really, I think, be good uses for early rollouts, for natural implications or natural application of Gen AI into the network management stack.
Wow, it's really great that talking about Gen AI, you zoomed in first into the AI bit, talking about like correlations, because essentially that's where the value of AI is. I mean, when we talk about Gen AI, people tend to forget that it's the AI, the correlation, the prediction part of it,
Yeah.
its ability to detect patterns and to identify things, underlying events. That's where the bulk of the use case for AI is. And then we have this Gen AI usually clouding out the actual value proposition of AI, because you see this fantastic tool where you just ask questions in normal human language and then it gives you back some configurations. But without that AI part, I don't think we will have that kind of outputs that we are looking for, right?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And so when we talk low code and no code environments, performance and people that can easily be applied to the configuration of the network itself and the network elements themselves, and optimization, performance optimization, certain what if scenarios, right, by pattern matching over the time, and
Yeah.
things that normally a human researcher, academic person who's studying your network and trying to make recommendations based on that as a consultative type approach. That's a great place where Gen AI, I think, has a natural fit.
Yep, yep, exactly. Okay, so we've talked about some of the use cases, and also, we've seen how beneficial it is, especially for employees, engineers, and so forth. When you have all these insights at your fingertips. But now let's talk about some of the challenges and risks that AI and also Gen AI brings, because people are just going to ask questions into a machine, and the machine will kind of generate all the scenarios, simulations you want, predictions, configurations that you want. So I guess what do you think organizations should be cautioned of
Yeah.
when it comes to using these tools?
I think there's a double-edged sword of having some early successes, right? Having some early victories. Do we over-rotate a little too fast into the capabilities of the tool? And by that I mean, as we have, maybe there's always the worry about roles and jobs moving to AI and things like that, and maybe I think it's more of an argument of doing more with less, right? Where I would have to maybe increase significantly my staff to be more responsive to needs. Maybe I can make my staff more optimal and go that route as opposed to just adding raw headcounts. So when we start talking about moving that and moving L1 help desk knock and maybe even parts of L2 into being augmented with some generative AI capabilities, I think there's that risk that we start to become over reliant on those type of tool sets. And the reason I say that maybe there's a risk there is, within Gen AI themselves, right? More and more of these models are starting to talk about mixture of experts, right? Trying to have, different ways of attacking a problem, different solutions. Let's see what the experts come up with, and let's compare notes at the end of this. So I think if an organization keeps that kind of concept of a mixture of experts, where only one of the experts happens to be
Yeah.
the AI
Yeah.
itself, and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
augmented with human intelligence in the decision train, in the interpretation chain, understanding the quality of the inputs that came in and how things were modeled to begin with. I think then it can be very good, but I just worry that sometimes people might over-rotate to the cost benefits of being able to move more and more of this into automated fashion, and that could have some drawbacks and some downsides. Another, I think, really is doing the future planning for outage windows and change windows and things like that, right? Again, people might over rotate and say, well, we've done impact assessments and things like this. And, there are tool sets out there where people try to estimate change impacts on your
Yeah.
infrastructure,
Yeah.
give you real feedback before you actually do the deployment, before you actually roll it out, right? We prep the deployment and even model the application of the deployment and try to learn from it, which is all good. I think that having that AI be one in there, but we still need that human layer, I believe, to be the final arbiter, right, of the decision, the no go decision, and then the reason I say that also is everybody's talked about defense in depth and security and attack vectors. Well, now that we're talking about AI and I can
Yeah.
feed faulty data into some of the models, I can feed faulty
Yeah.
behavior even as a
Yeah.
test so that
Yes.
the AI picks up on it and you're starting to taint some of the data that is being fed into the model. And no longer is it an attack vector, right? A one-dimensional
Yes.
tensor. Now it's an attack tensor, right? They could be coming
Yeah.
from many different angles at the same
Angles.
time
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're attacking the overall tensor, the overall multi inner dimensions that are being intermixed together to get the power that we've gained from generative AI, but it brings a whole new security attack surface, I think, into play
Yep.
that could
Exactly.
be tainted. And so those are some of the worries I think that I have. It's a new place for me if I were, the black hat type, and I wanted to come in and go after that. So many more opportunities, I think, to just be more powerful with the tools that the enterprises might be using to make poor outcomes, I guess, for companies and for individuals. So those are a
Exactly.
couple examples of I think what some of the worries might challenges that might be posed.
Yep, I think that's these concerns are really valid, and I guess as with any other technology, it gets getting used to, and then like what you said, the human element is definitely important, just to make sure that you use these tools to augment
Yeah.
your capabilities, but not rely entirely on these tools.
Yeah, it is because one of the powers of a lot of these AI experiments that have been going on in the industry, not specific to network management, but there are documented cases where people get just totally wild outcomes on something like you can read your favorite tech pub magazine out there, and a model has been trained in Hindu, and all of a sudden it can speak fragmented Bengali wait, we never trained it on Bengali. How did this
Yeah,
happen,
yeah.
right? Or, they try to train a model to, see if it can decode CAPTCHA, and at the end the model says, "Well, you told me at the beginning I'm not allowed to decode CAPTCHAs, therefore I did answer it." And people are like, who told it to say this, right? So you
Yes, yes,
truly get the
exactly.
exposure to the AI, and kind of maybe there's a creepiness factor there, but
Yeah,
there's also a
yeah.
very powerful factor now. And that what I mean, you're looking at the problem sets of today in the network management in a whole new dimension because of some of these things that you
Yep.
potentially didn't even account for at the beginning of the process. And again, that can be powerful, but it can also be tainted in some cases. So it's got to be taken with a grain of salt.
Interesting. So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. The human involvement in the whole process and how important it is. So let's dive deeper into that. So what role does human intelligence have now that machines are claiming to be as smart as us? So do we have a role apart from being there to validate these outputs?
Yeah.
What other roles do we have?
Yeah, I think, some examples of that are, again, it almost flows back to an earlier point of becoming over reliant on here, because then people might look at, the most expert level people on your staff, right? The most highly trained and the people who are critical to maintaining proper operation. At that highest critical level, right? Do we need to work to protect that? Um, it might be human nature to start again. It falls into that over reliance argument where I've become so comfortable that I feel that I trust the models. I trust the Gen AI. I trust it so much. Do we find ourselves in a place where it kind of dovetails back to your earlier question? Do we find ourselves in a place where we're allowing our expertise to become diluted, to become less on point, and we maybe devalue some of that? So I think that we need the humans to be still on top of that game, to be able to understand not only what the outcome or what the recommendation or what the specific result of this operation that the Gen AI is, what you've asked it to do and what it's attempting to solve for you, to be able to understand how it arrived at its conclusions, right? What data sets did it use?
Yeah.
People can look at AI and talk about general, internet browsing and searching and coming up with, combinations. Or there's the retrieval augmented AI, right? Where we're just looking at more specifically just our company subset of data and what, as the data set we draw upon to draw these conclusions and draw these, to train these models. I think that being able to understand in depth how it actually reasoned and how it came up, just as if you're going to do that to a coworker, right? Management. Well, okay, it's
Yep.
not enough for
Yep.
you to tell
Yep.
me you're the expert and therefore it's got
Yeah.
to be this way. You're going to
Yes.
have to convince me of this fact, right? And as humans, we need to not lose hold of that, just because it's a machine that happens in this case to truly be doing the thinking on here and coming up with it, as opposed to a human. We still need that interrogation, inspection, and proof points that the data is solid, that was being used to base the decisions upon. It's like garbage in, garbage out, scenarios that we've always talked about. So
Yeah.
making sure that the predictions and all that are not leading to false outputs. And so that's going to be the biggest part, I think, of one of the things about the human intelligence, maintaining that oversight capabilities in all these areas that we're talking about. But if we use the tools right, it becomes easier for a human to do that oversight
Yeah.
without having to dive into the mounds and mounds
Exactly.
of atomic detail
Mm-hmm.
behind
Mm-hmm.
those things. I understand where you got the data, the
Mm-hmm.
context of the data that you're using. I don't need to know all the elements of data to make
Mm-hmm.
those assertions.
Wow, that's really amazing. So I guess like one of the things that we've heard in the industry is like how network engineers who used to do all these mundane and tedious tasks now get to become managers. You know, they actually manage all these agents. Well, like in the case of agentic AI, you have all these agents running all these
Yeah.
tasks, and you basically just give them instructions and then validate what they are doing, and then plan the workflow processes and stuff like that. So.
And I think there's a satisfaction component that can come from that too. You know, often, whether it's vendors or, whomever in the community are talking about the percentage of keeping the lights on versus doing new innovative things in the company. And of course, a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
people
yes,
gravitate towards wanting to
yeah,
do something new and fun
yes,
and interesting and
exactly,
innovative and try to
exactly.
shy away. Now, there is a subset of people I'll grant who are happy just to sit there and just do the mundane all day. And this is my day job. And I'm going to go, coach my kids
Yes,
soccer at night. And that's all I
yes,
care about.
yes, I understand. Yep.
But on the other side of the
Yeah.
equation, a lot of people want to be challenged in their role, want
Mm-hmm,
to be
mm-hmm,
challenged to do things. So this could be a positive, to the full-time engineering as a profession aspect of
exactly.
network engineers' jobs, because now theoretically, if this is working correctly, you're focusing more of your time and effort on the newer efforts and making sure to put the proper cycles into new project designs and architectures and building them up front to be great sources of data into these models to feed these models,
Yep.
and so that when the inference, not only modeling, but when the inferencing happens and we're actually accomplishing data built on what's been modeled in the past, that we've gone to the depth of building for that data and building for that enhanced operation. Whereas in the past, many times, we'd have, let's say, a network switch, or we'd have some sort of firewalling capability, or VPN headends,
Yep.
or load balancing, whatever services you put on the network. And we capture the data and put context around the data, and we summarize the data at that network element level. Okay, so by inherently you're losing information because you don't have the
Yep.
context of everything around it. And you do that item by item by item, and who synthesizes that data together. If instead we make the model, everything just sends all of its data, let the AI do its job in creating the context. It's calculating the synapses between the neurons, right? It's calculating the
Yes.
factors, it's
Yes.
calculating the parameters that go into this model, and it can create those associations and assertions. So it becomes a fascinating thing for, I think, the network engineers to be able to ensure that all the data we want to know that could affect are indeed fed into the right engine, where in the past, as humans, we just knew we could never process that much information. So I think those things are going to be building a lot of momentum and growing the skill set of the network engineer, but not changing the skill set of the network engineer.
Awesome. So, okay, let's look at Supermicro now.
Sure.
Tell us more about Supermicro's solutions for networks. Have you introduced, or do you plan to, introduce Gen AI based capabilities?
Yes, yes. The adage of, why, if you're going to build AI fabrics and AI clusters and systems and things like that, why aren't you using AI to do such a thing, right? But really, at the baseline, we follow a model of using, industry leading vendor silicon to put the switches that we put out in the market in our solutions together. Some of the market leaders are well known out there, and we use them along with a lot of other people in our solutions. And then there's the frontline layer, which is just basically a device management function. That's all. Okay, that's all great. That's table stakes. That's what's needed. But how do we optimize that infrastructure? This is where often, okay, those are the tools, but my desire is not to aggregate a tool or to produce a guide to
Yep.
how best use this Snap-on tool to go build my house. I want to have the conversations at the architectural level. How do I build this building? How do I build this house? How do I build this IT function? How do I build this system? And by where the natural human intelligence would be out there to piece these together, to have consultative work with partners and consulting industry experts and et cetera, to come up with the best ways to design these. If some of that can actually be iterated upon in the industry, that's where we want to go. There's startups in that area. We're no different, right, in terms of trying to elevate beyond the device level infrastructure. And so in AI fabric in and of itself, to begin with, where there's many times 100 or in some cases even thousands of switching elements and tens of thousands of links between these devices
Yes,
out
yes.
there. There's no human who's going to really be able to do that and keep it straight
Yeah,
and keep it out. And
yeah.
then how do you optimize it? How do you summarize routes to keep within the limits of resource limits of the various elements that are out there? So these get to be complex problems real fast, and so you need to use a tool like an AI type architectural software package to actually pull some of this together, but also to adapt as you add tenants onto a GPU utility, AI utility, as you try to trend performance or prove out performance that is on there, or do diagnostics if there's suspected, some of these failure rates, things like that. I'll need to leverage these tools to be able to make the recommendations, start looking at trending, where let the tools tell me based on consumption rates and what it learns out there, even looking out potentially at the industry. What do we envision our growth rate to be 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and how do we get in front of that and facilities planning and whether we're going to have to start saying the facilities we have, are they sufficient? Are we going to have to move into liquid cooling solutions? Are we going to have to move into co-location facilities to
Yep.
get those liquid cooling solutions?
Yes.
Having that consultative approach come from the AI, along with the humans, as we talked about earlier, but another, I think, valuable input to help, provide that data behind it, where a lot of times it's the expert gut feel, and with a minimal set of data review that's out there, having that more thorough analysis and tying these together. So that's what at the company, at Supermicro, not only just building the switch layer and building the infrastructure and then the NICs that go in the systems and then the systems themselves as a full stack type solution, but actually how do we integrate the telemetry across all of these things, and how do we measure consumption and utilization and usage, and how do we predict failures, and how do we even architect these upfront
Yeah.
systems, and how do we architect them for the best route summarization and the least amount of touch points needed for a human? How do we validate? Because on some of these clusters, we'd spend 3 months doing a deployment, and cabling teams would double, triple, quadruple check on the links. Oh yeah, we're absolutely certain everything's done right. And if you can have a system that can actually automatically scrub the fabric and test out and validate everything truly that it is all designed as it's supposed to be, that's so much more powerful, and it makes the time to actually doing the deployment far easier. So those are the things we're investing in, the tooling to do some of that. And we also have partnerships with people in the industry, some that are out there now, some will be announced in coming quarters, that actually bring that together, and some of the
Okay.
companies that have software that focus highly in those areas, and how can we synthesize and harmonize our hardware into those software solutions so that it's not this roadblock. Some information is thrown across the fence, some information isn't, but how can we truly make that deep level of tie for telemetry and information? And that's really what we're trying to do with what we're doing, so that again it gets back to proper triage, fastest remediation of issues, and restore of servers. And so there's, again, not just telemetry of a system, although that's critical and very, very important, but even that upfront. So we're shifting, they talk in security world, they talk about shift left security, right? Move the security more into the development phase and dispose of, later testing phases and things like that, or deployment phases, have the developers develop with security in mind. Here we're talking about, can we take that and architect all of this much sooner in the process, in the planning of the infrastructure process, as opposed to layering it on at the day 0, 1, and 2 type points in time. So those type of things are products that we're working on. Those are our focus products. We see a lot of startup activity, I think, in the industry going and tackling that too. Some we'll work with, and some will be alternative offerings with different trade-offs for people to consider as they do their deployments.
Amazing. I think you explained really well on the actual value that you guys bring, leveraging AI and Gen AI for a lot of, common use cases in network management. And I think that's a great place to start. And we expect to see a lot more excitement in this area. And here we are at the end of our session on this amazing topic. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today and for sharing all this, especially on Supermicro's initiatives and role in this place.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak, take the time. I hope it was of value. It's really an exciting area. I think it's an exciting time in the industry, something that a lot of time network management's been out there for a long, long time. There's been, spurious activity here and there throughout the time, and it's kind of moved along. But I think this is one of the cases where the momentum with AI in and of itself and moving that in the network management side is really bringing some, I think, exciting possibilities to take what's been I wouldn't say challenging because that's just our day job. It's supposed to be challenging, but
Yes, yes,
to
it is.
really provide a better level of tooling to be more efficient and achieve even more in our roles.
Awesome. And to everyone tuning in, thank you guys for listening. If you want to learn more, visit www.supermicro.com and follow us for more updates and insights as we continue to uncover the latest in technology and telecommunications. See you in our next session. Bye-bye.